This morning I woke up and I had about 14 different emails, I think it was, that I counted, because of a recent Olympic event that happened that involved horses. And um, the world audience, will say, wound up seeing a certain degree of resistance in a horse and how a particular person handled it. And so right now it seems to be the hot topic for everybody. And, I just thought I would jump on here really quickly because it's good that the conversation has started. It's good that there are people who are going, wait a minute, why is this happening? What's going on with this horse? For me, the particular question of the day, just for discussion since we're opening that door, is how much resistance in the horse needs to be present before we believe them. And this is something that I see all the time, whether it's at a backyard schooling show and just low level whatever, whether it's top level international competitors, doesn't matter if it's English or Western disciplines. How many times have you ever seen a horse that won't go into the arena and has to be led in? Or how many times have you seen, we'll say in inspections or trot ups, horses bouncing, kicking, biting, rearing, coming up with all kinds of different behaviors? How many times have you seen the horse seem to do a beautiful test and then something goes wrong with tack or equipment, and then the horse explodes or overreacts as the audience would expect because they just saw this horse that seemed to be liking its job, or whatever the human story is in that moment? And just as I posted in my Dear Sam Horse Help Horsemanship series that I have on YouTube, in this most recent episode about the lack of focus in humans, that we only have slightly a few seconds more than what goldfish have the ability to do. Right now, this seems to be the focus, so I wanted to jump on here with the video and, tell people that the resistance in the horse does not need to be at peak levels before we start doing something about it. And that's I always use the analogy, would you wait until you saw the car running the red light, it's rolling through the intersection, and you add gas pedal and then go, oh my gosh, we crashed, and act surprised about it? Probably not. And yet there's so many indicators that we see in these horses way before the peak level of resistance, and we ignore them. We ignore them because either everybody else's horse looks like they're doing it, because people who are supposed to be professionals are telling us that that's just what horses do in the sport. We ignore all the subtle, reasonable ways that the horse shows resistance. They don't want to be caught. They don't want to be led. They're fussed when they're tacked. They don't want to get in the horse trailer. They're exploding when they get out of the horse trailer. They can't stand tied. They're moving off as you go to get on. They can't halt once you start riding. I mean, all of these levels of build-up anticipation, and many times the response from people is add more pressure. Make him stand still, make him move forward, make him go past the scary object. And so as we're continuously adding more pressure all the time, no matter what the horse is doing, where he's asking for help, where he's showing he's insecure, where he's showing he's fearful, his level of resistance has to start increasing. And as we saw on the world stage, this horse who's, everyone wants to put these words. I mean, the way in which the announcers describe the situation is the epitome of what's wrong with the horse industry. I mean, we'll just stop right there. And coming from this place of, why isn't the horse complying because he's expected to in this moment, as opposed to starting with the question as, what did he look like when you caught him this morning? How many days maybe did this horse show resistance? To me, that is not the first time that horse did that. Just as with all the other horses, whether it's, at the backyard schooling show or top level competition, it doesn't just have to be competitions. I mean, it could be on the group trail ride. It could be at roping practice. It could be within any discipline at any level of riding or sport or interaction that, as we start to see resistance in the horse, if the only way in which we choose to handle it is to add more pressure, we're creating a ticking bomb. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when things will explode. And unfortunately, there are so many horses that are so bullied through tack, through equipment, through training purposes, into complying with the human program, the human convenience, the human time frame, the human agenda. It's like the last piece that's ever considered is the actual horse, even though everything is supposed to be based around the idea of this equine partnership, the togetherness of the horse working with the human. And yet there is no real platform for that horse to have thoughts, or for him, when he expresses that fear and that defensiveness and that concern, for it to be respectfully addressed by the human. Instead, what do? We critique it, we shut it down, we drive him forward, we make him comply, we teach that horse a lesson. All of these ego-paced, knee-jerk human reactions that we've had for decades in these horses. And unfortunately, this was a topic way before this big event happened on the world stage at the Olympics, but this was a topic at a recent clinic, and people were asking, well, when you see all this resistance or problem horses or whatever, what happens? And I said, unfortunately, there's more horses. So a lot of these, top trainers, a lot of these top facilities that promise the owners big results and, the wins and all this sort of stuff, they're not saying send me 1 or 2 horses. They're saying send me 5 or 6 horses. And I might pick 1 or 2, not out of even the physical athletic ability or potential of that horse, but out of the horse who has the mental endurance to not break down under the pressure of how that particular training program works. And there's so many things that go on behind the scenes at top levels, not even top levels, it could be at any level, but certainly at the top level when the pressure's there, that if the general population, had any clue about it, they would be mortified. They would be beyond mortified. And again, it's not limited to one discipline, one type of riding, one, particular scenario. This happens all over the world, all the time, every day. And yeah, there are a majority of people who look the other way, or the students are being bullied by the trainers just as the horses are into, this is what it takes in order to produce this level horse. Or the justification of, this much, bucking, kicking, bolting, rearing, flying sideways, not wanting to go in the arena, and all the other stuff that comes up is just normal because the horse is so athletic and he's so physically fit. That's always a good explanation. And so therefore, this is how he handles himself. And we have to stop and we have to say, is this really the quality or the goal of what it is that we're looking for? And when we talk about things like at all costs, that I think we've seen some pretty big examples in recent times that have accidentally come to the limelight as far as, what is the cost? What do you think will happen to that horse after all of this event, this particular horse that happened to bring spotlight on the Olympic platform? What do you think will happen after the fact, after that scenario? And yet, will practices change? Will anybody stop and say, if we are seeing this much resistance ahead of time, maybe this is not the appropriate horse for this scenario, or he's not ready. But often when there's time pressure, like an event, like a performance, and we've done all this time and we've done all this training and we don't have other options, when push comes to shove, the horse is forced to go. The horse is forced to make it happen. And I know personally, I've witnessed in international competitions, coming from behind the scenes and then watching the performances, where there's, accidents, serious accidents, perhaps life-changing accidents. And the resistance was there in the horse ahead of time. The defensiveness was there ahead of time. The horse had shown many times in his behavior that he wasn't ready. And yet, because it came down to time and money on the human's end, the horse was forced to go, and so I guess I came on here this morning because, like I said, I had the 14 emails where people were asking, like, when you see this scenario, like, what do you do? And, to me, the biggest thing you can do is stop it at the lowest levels, meaning put value to when we see that horse showing the most subtle signs of resistance. And if the feedback we're getting from the people we are turning to for information, for insight, for guidance, for suggestions, for training is telling us this is just how they behave, then we need to take that as a red flag. We need to choose that, like, if this is where we're going in this route, we have to understand the horse is the one who will pay the cost, in order for success, versus saying, how about I find someone who perhaps has the approach of working with the horse and helping him work through that fear, the defensiveness, that whatever he has going on, and yeah, it may take more time, and yes, we may not qualify for the whatever show that we were hoping to go for, but that if working with the horse in the long run to help him move through these areas of concern and fear, what do you think his performance will look like on the other side? Won't he jump better or offer, a better performance, or whatever it is that was being asked the horse? Doesn't matter the discipline. Or do we just say, well, that's just what he does and let's just force it and drive it? Open up any tack magazine. How many bits do you see? how many tie downs, how many martingales, how many different leverage devices, how many different types of spurs, how many different types of whips. All of these contraptions is to drive and to contain all the time. That's all they're for. It's not about if anybody's a quality rider. It's not about if there's a quality equine partnership. It's not about checking in with the horse's, ability to be mentally available or be adaptable. It's not checking in with the horse's softness. It's about, I need this change in horse behavior irrelevant to the cost, and here is how I will leverage him into doing it. So even on the most basic level, even for the pleasure rider who never competes, when we start to see these defensive, these tight, these fearful, these reactive horse behaviors, we need to stop and we need to start the conversation there and saying, this is not normal. This is not how it should be when we go to interact with our horse. And if we're ignoring it now, it's only going to morph into bigger, more dramatic, and more dangerous behavior later. It does not just go away through practice. If your horse is fearful of something and you practice the same thing 50 million times, but you never address the root cause of the fear, his behavior, however he's showing resistance or defensiveness, will just come out in another unwanted behavior. And, this is where I find it's the professional's responsibility to take on educating the public as far as what is a quality foundation. What is that? How do we read horse body language? How do we believe the horse? How do we help the horse work through scenarios of concern versus just forcing him until he maybe quits and gives up in that particular moment, but on a different day when something unexpected happens, that all of a sudden explosion, which really was potentially building for days, for weeks, for months, for years, comes out. I've seen horses that see their their reflection. They have so much fear and defensiveness. They see their reflection in the indoor school for the first time, and they jump at themselves. And thousands of pieces of broken glass is all in their neck and ingrained in their chest and their leg for years, still being asked to perform at Olympic levels. I've seen horses, come out dripping blood, whether it's from their sides, their nostrils, their mouth, all these different things. I mean, there's horrific things that people don't realize are occurring in order to make things work with the horse. And people aren't realizing that this is going on behind the scenes. So the best way for things not to escalate is to make a big deal of it at the most minor beginning level. So that horse that just seems like, oh, he's just being naughty and doesn't want to be caught. Think of all of that resistance to where if he wants nothing to do with the human from the very beginning, what is the leading going to be like? What is the getting on going to be like? What is the ride going to be like? And everything else you ask of him. Everything is based on fear and defensiveness. So you continuing to ask more isn't going to make it magically better. And then if you look at the bigger levels in these international competitions, there's so many of these horses where they're confined, they're contained, they're wrapped, I'll say bubble wrapped, they're primped, we've taken all the horse out of them. There's no social, there's no turnout, there's no all kinds of things, that we could do to help that horse be in a better mental and physical and emotional place. And yet we're always told, but this is for the horse's good, this is for the horse's good, but we have to do things this way and we have to do it like that and we can't do this and we can't ask that of him and we can't. Nobody asks why. No, because this seems so normal for so many people that we contain, we drive, we push, we force, we make, and then we go, oh my gosh, the horse responded, the horse overreacted, the horse fell apart, without ever stopping and going, we had all the initial indications, we had seen all this coming, but we didn't believe the horse. So this was just a good time to open up the discussion. And if you missed part of the video, go back and watch it, because I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'd love to hear what your perspective is on how much pressure should it take before we believe the horse. How much resistance should we see before we need to stop what we're doing, no matter what our agenda is, and going, okay, there are pieces missing here and I need to address those. And how uncomfortable are we in bringing up this conversation with our trainers, with our peers, with our horse enthusiast friends, because we feel insecure. We don't want to get into an argument. We don't want to offend anyone. We don't want to question anyone. And yet, in the end, we are our horse's voice. So if we are going along with training practices and approaches that are continuously driving, forcing, making, containing, whatever it is that we're doing in our horse, then we are complicit in saying this is how we think the horse needs to be treated. And therefore, if that's how we're going to approach it, we cannot be surprised, reprimanded, angered, frustrated, or otherwise when the horse finally comes back and shows in his dramatic, dangerous behavior that it's too much, that it's too overwhelming, and he is done. It's simple as that. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you next time.